The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the speaker's own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of a Master's Journey Foundation. The material and information presented here is for general information purposes only. A Master's Journey Foundation's name and all forms and abbreviations are the property of its owner, and its use does not imply endorsement of or opposition to any specific organization, product, or service.
Good afternoon. This is a Master's Journey Foundation, Episode 1, bringing you an interview with an MSW professional here in the Yuma, Arizona area, Mr. Jaime Gonzalez. And I am Ruth Whistler. So Jaime, thanks for coming and welcome, and thanks so much. I'm going to move these just a little bit so I can see you.
All right.
Thanks so much for agreeing to share your story and be here with us.
Well, thank you for having me.
So my first question, tell us a little bit about the Jaime Gonzalez story. How did you get to be you, and who are you now?
So it starts in around 1996, which was the day I was born, in Mexico, in southern Mexico. By 1988, my father moved us to the border here in Mexico, and 2 years later, I was living in Yuma.
Okay, all right. Do you want to share with us just a little bit of your early life around some of those moves or anything else you'd like to tell us?
My earliest memories are going to kindergarten and actually more in the first grade. In the first grade, that's what I remember the most. I always share the story that my first grade teacher still sees me and she was like, "Oh, Jaime, I can't believe you were the first one to learn how to read."
Wow! So you were a reader even back then?
Yes.
Even at that young age. How
Yeah.
about that? How about that? What was adolescence like for you? That might be a loaded question.
Yeah. Well, it was a typical adolescence. I went to school. I hung out with friends. My favorite sport is soccer. We played a lot of soccer. We bent a few fences, neighborhood fences, because of the ball and how hard we played.
Wow.
We got a little trouble there with the neighbors, but yeah.
I'll bet you did. I'll bet you did. Jaime, coming forward a little bit, when did that whole concept of college, when did that first creep into your life?
Well, my first experience with college was not a very good one because I actually had to drop out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but a few years later, actually around 13 years later, I came back with a renewed attitude to start college and actually find a career or obtain the career that I was going, which was social work, of course.
I'm thinking that a lot of people who just heard you say that may be in the very same place that you were, where maybe they started school and then they had to drop out and they're not really sure now what they should do. Could you tell us a little bit about your decision to come back to school?
So we're gonna have to start a little bit from the beginning. A lot of what led to my failure, my first failure at college, and some of the how I say my experiences comes because I was born with a severe visual disorder that severely limits my vision. So growing up, I went through the whole process of. Well, in the beginning, it was harder because we got to go back to the '90s, which was resources were a little harder to get. The communication was also difficult because of my parents and with teachers and programs. And here in Yuma, we're kind of far away from the bigger cities, which they get all the resources. So I basically went through school with all the way up to middle school with not that much support. It was just all me and what the teachers would help me with. Because, for example, I have some vision, but I struggled, for example, seeing the board, reading regular print, and I guess because of that, it forced me because I became very independent. So I used whatever I could in considering my limitations to make it all the way to high school. And by the time I was to high school, that's around, you're talking about the 2000s, there were more resources, but because of pride or the coping I did not accept them. I refused vocational rehabilitation. I refused the people who would go and evaluate me because I wanted to be normal.
Yeah.
And in the sense of just like any other high schooler. I didn't want to stand out for having to go to extra classes or having to use magnifiers. So, because of that, I managed to make it to the college in 2004, but that's when I failed because, as you know, college is a little bit more technical. It's more how I would call it real life because you are now your hand is not there being held so much because it's almost like going to work. If you miss, you get bad grades. If you don't turn in your assignment, you don't bad grades. You don't get redo. You don't get extra credit sometimes. So because of that, I failed my first experience with college. Then, not knowing what else to do, I worked in retail for a while, and again, my visual limitation got caught up to me again, where I was let go from a retail store because I caused some accidents, and I did not know what to do until I heard about again vocational rehabilitation. So I mean, I think I kind of I'm on track, but can you remind me of the question?
Yes, of course. The question is, how did you decide to get back to school? And actually, I think you're right on track. You're telling us the whole circumstance of your life, and now that you have this MSW and all this education, one of the things I think I'm hearing you say is that in terms of human development, you were pretty much in that teenage thing that said, "I've got this," even though maybe in the real world you didn't.
Yes.
And you had to grow up a little bit to get to that place where you said, "I'm going to take the help."
Yes, that's sometimes circumstances, life lights a fire under you. That's when I realized prior to being let go of that retail store, I was in a big accident where I knew that sooner or later my body was not gonna be enough to be the provider of for example, doing labor, and that's when I realized I have to go seek other opportunities. The counselor at VR basically gave me two options when I was there. Either he can find me another type of manual labor retail job, or I can go back to school. And thinking back,
that was it, huh?
yeah, that was a fork, the big fork in life.
Yeah.
And going back to what I told you about being the first one to read, that's like the twist in the story that I was the blind kid who was the first one to learn how to read.
Imagine that.
In the first grade. And I knew I had potential in school because I did enjoy school. It was just the frustration of not being able to see the board, standing out because I had to read these huge printed papers. And I was willing to confront that because I knew otherwise I would just rely on government support, and I did not want to do that. So
good. Thanks for that. I think that's going to be really helpful to people who are listening. I think they're going to appreciate that. Can I ask you another question?
Yeah.
When you came back to school, when did you first think that you were going to go do a bachelor's of social work? You came back and you started at a community college, right? At Arizona Western. Again, my question, I guess, is when did you decide you were going to go for that bachelor's, and then when did you make that decision to go on to the master's of social work? How did that happen?
So the great thing about social work and social workers is that we tend to seek each other. So the counselor at the VR, he had a social work background. And when you start the VR, you are supposed to, the first thing, before you begin services, you have to have a goal. So we explored, he did an evaluation on me, and he suggested that straight up based on my what he could see from me in his evaluation. And he suggested social work. And honestly, back then, I just thought social work or social workers were literally just the people who work at the social work office and handed out social work. I mean, social, what's it called,
those paychecks and
the Social Security card. That's literally what I thought. The only thing I knew about social work.
Yeah, and you learned a lot then.
Yeah. So I went with it because I don't know. That's another thing about me that once I make up my mind, I feel that I go with the flow and I try to make good choices. and based on what is being presented to me presently in my life, and that was what was being presented. So I agree with them, not knowing exactly what I was getting myself into in terms
Sure.
of social work, and I began my journey by first going to a agency to train people with blindness, low vision, and get back up to speed in terms of daily living skills,
Sure.
education, but with the goal always that goal of going back to school and beginning a degree in social work.
But it was always there with you.
Yeah, it was
You're-
always there ever
Yeah,
since.
yeah.
Ever since and when you think about it, social work has been there all my life because
Yeah.
there were social workers when I was a child. I remember getting visited by social workers even when back before I was in kindergarten because they saw that limitation in my eyes. Unfortunately, again, back in the 90s, it was harder to do that. For example, the technology wasn't there.
Right.
I can
right.
now confidently use a computer because it has a software to magnify everything.
Right,
And since
right.
everything is digital, it's a lot easier for me. Back then, that was not. It was there, but it was more.
Yeah.
The technology you had to use a giant screen, and you can't lug a giant screen to class, to work, to anywhere.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And now it's just a computer.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So moving
Yeah.
moving forward into that technology piece, if I can, your work that you're doing now with the Master's Journey Foundation, you are doing so much with technology and gathering data and providing data and recording data and writing data. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
We did a lot of reading. We did a lot of research. Again, once I went to my first intro to social work class, that's when I fell in love with the profession because I saw the potential in simply helping other people in so many ways, not just the person to person, just even when you have that decision making based off of research where you can help so many people at once, not just that person to person, which social work is typically thought as.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, right, right. I have another really important, heavy kind of question for you, Jaime. I'm wondering when you were in school or just out of school after you first just graduated, but particularly in this journey that you've taken, what are some of the things that happened to you that you just weren't expecting? Anything just come out of left field there and kind of grab your attention?
What are unexpected things is that while in the bachelor's program for social work, you began this phase where you take courses and do exercises that help you. What would you say? It's a retrospect about your life, and
that's
that's
for
when
sure.
all that trauma, coping, those bad experiences, looking back into where I came from, where my family comes from, and that's like a big. It's a huge experience because you go back and you by doing that retrospect, you learn more about yourself, and that's one thing that I learned, that where if you want to help people, you gotta first help yourself, be comfortable with yourself, and learn confront those issues, traumas. Anything that can in a way hold you back, because I believe that even whatever you've been through can because you're still here, it means that you survive. Your resilience led you to survive and continue to on your path, and now you can use all that to help other people who are in a similar, or even apply what you learned to help people in similar or different situations.
And it sounds to me, we were chatting a little bit before we went into this interview, and it sounds to me that's a lot what you're doing in your job. So I'd kind of like to link that with sitting here, you're working with this foundation to put it together, to make it work. You're doing a phenomenal job working with human beings at a meso and macro type of level. What's next for you?
Well, after I received the master's degree, I graduated. I found it in a great place where they help people with all types of disabilities,
Mhm.
or they found me. We found each other
You did
again.
find each
that
other.
whole go
Yeah.
with the flow type of deal.
Yeah.
I would never thought I would work with people, for example, with developmental disabilities. It's a whole different aspect of disabilities, but I mean they're still together because, or how we like to say, we like to think of as differently abled people. And now I'm working with again people with mental, emotional, or physical disabilities, and we're doing what we're doing is helping them. Again, like that one counselor that I met in VR, helping them find that motivation to use their strengths to motivate them to find a fulfilling career or employment.
Yeah, yeah. Social work sure does have a lot of different pieces, doesn't it?
Yes.
It really does. So before we wrap this up, I do want to ask you, is there anything that I have not thought to ask that you want to share with people who are listening to us today? Because I think you might have some pretty important things to share with folks.
My message is because of my experiences and working with people who are differently abled, is to never give up, to don't give up on your goals, but especially don't give up on yourselves, because you can ultimately find the perfect job, have everything you wanted, but if you're not comfortable with yourself, you're not gonna enjoy it. And I want to send that message to people who are differently able, so that they are inspired and seek those resources that it took me a while to seek, because my personal experience, but people who are currently in their teens and adolescents, who are just coming up, and there's that point in adolescence where they begin to ask you, what are you going to do the rest of your life?
Right.
And that is a very hard
Right.
question to ask somebody who
Right.
might not even know who they are.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and looking for the resources
Exactly.
that are provided to people who are differently abled.
Sure. Sure.
I ask people who are listening to believe in the system, because there are some flaws in the systems, but believe in the system, and a lot of times it's how bad you want it, how much
Yeah.
you want it.
Yeah.
The effort that you put into it is what you're gonna ultimately receive. I've seen people who are in my situation who, because of their situation, their environment, they did not put as much effort, and unfortunately they did not follow through with their goals.
Yeah.
But I've also seen people, wonderful people, who, because they kept going, and you are allowed to even fail and step back, but if you ultimately come back and continue, you will find fulfillment. I am now find fulfillment with the work that I'm doing.
Jaime, those are really strong words, and they're very, very welcome words. They're great words. I just want to thank you, Jaime Gonzalez, for allowing us to have this interview here together. We really appreciate it. I'm Ruth Whistler again, Dr. Whistler. I'm a faculty at Northern Arizona University for social work, and I also work with ASU for social work, and I also teach for AWC in social work. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to get in touch with our foundation. We will be delighted to talk to you about this field. How do you navigate the ups and the downs of school? Jaime is one of the officers of the foundation, and the rest of us will be talking to you from time to time. Again, this is episode number 1. There's lots more coming with lots of different stories, lots of different questions, lots of different viewpoints, and we are real excited to be here with you. Have a wonderful day. Via con Dios.